Welcome to the West Chicago Public Library District's presentation, Bookplates for Lunch. Today we are going to talk about the Neltnor family, one of the founding families of West Chicago, and specifically about Cornelia Neltnor Anthony, a prominent woman in West Chicago who collected over 10,000 bookplates over the span of 14 years. Bookplates are decorative and artistic labels that are placed on the inside cover of a book. Their primary purpose is to show ownership of the material, and they are noted for their intricate artistic features. Bookplates date back to 1480, and the earliest English bookplate dates back to 1520. As stated earlier, Cornelia Neltnor Anthony, a prominent figure from the Neltnor family of West Chicago, collected over 10,000 bookplates. Her collection is international in scope and at one time was considered by librarians to be only second to the Library of Congress's bookplate collection. But before we look at the bookplate collection, let's talk about the Neltnor family history. Cornelia Eames Neltnor Anthony was born to John C. Neltnor and Mary Eames Kinney in 1868. Cornelia was born in West Chicago and throughout her adult life traveled with her husband around the United States and Canada. Cornelia and her husband later resettled in West Chicago, where she was active in community affairs and lived for the remainder of her life. John C. Neltnor was born in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, on November 7, 1841. He was born to Francis and Mary Neltnor, who were natives of Baden, Germany. In 1847, the Neltnor family left Pennsylvania and moved to Bloomingdale, Illinois. While in Bloomingdale, John worked as a chore boy to Dr. Sedgwick in Dr. Sedgwick's drugstore. Dr. Sedgwick was impressed by John and made John a partner in the drugstore. John then learned a trade that would serve him for the rest of his life. While in Bloomingdale, John met Mary Eames Kinney. While there is no picture of Mary, here is a newspaper article from their 60th wedding anniversary. From the newspaper article, we know that Mary was born in Itasca, Illinois on September 5, 1843. As a young girl, her family moved to Bloomingdale, Illinois. The Chicago Daily News article of September 3, 1926, describes her as a prolific writer of poetry and stories, and a person who showed a high degree of literacy skill. John and Mary were married on September 26, 1864. A year later, in 1865, John and Mary Neltnor moved to Turner Junction, as West Chicago was called then. John opened up a general store in 1865, using the skills that he had learned from Dr. Sedgwick's store. John operated this store until 1932. The Neltnors were one of the founding families of West Chicago. Here is a picture of John C. Neltnor and Cornelia on his 98th birthday. This newspaper article celebrating John's birthday also describes his general store. The newspaper article says that the general store contained everything from bananas to shoes, including needles, soap, canned goods, rope, and lamps. John also edited and owned the DuPage County Democrat newspaper for 13 years. He also served as a postmaster, town clerk, druggist, and police magistrate for 50 years during his time in West Chicago. John and Mary had 7 children, 5 sons and 2 daughters. Their careers ranged from postal clerk to real estate to attorney to journalist and civil engineer. In 1868, John Neltnor purchased a plot of land where he built his house in 1869. The house stood at the corner of Route 59 and Washington Street, with the house facing Washington Street. The plot of land was named Hickory Grove because the house was built on a lot where there were hickory trees surrounding the property. This picture shows the pathway leading to Grove Place. The house was built by day labor, using only white pine seasoned over charcoal fires. On the Neltnor property was a variety of trees and vegetation, including a red maple, canoe birch, 2 large red beeds, 2 50-year-old Cornelian cherry trees, 2 ginkgo trees, 2 Kentucky coffee trees, a European lorch, Siberian crab, and several large vines of Chinese wisteria. This is a drawing of the Neltnor home and property. The drawing can be found in the 1874 DuPage County Atlas. Mary Neltnor had designed the staircase for the house, which was considered unique for the time, as it connected the front and rear entrances of the home. Additionally, the Neltnors had a guest book at Grove Place, with the names of visitors from all parts of the country that came to see them. Between the newspaper business, drugstore, and other official titles held in West Chicago, the Neltnor family were well known in the community, and they hosted many events on their large property. This is a picture from a 4th of July community picnic, where over 100 people attended. However, the Neltnor property has just as much interesting history as the Neltnor family does. Local folklore held that Abraham Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas hosted the senatorial debates at Grove Place in 1858. While it's known that Stephen A. Douglas did speak on August 28, 1858 in West Chicago when running for Senate, others stated that Abraham Lincoln also did. Folklore held that Abraham Lincoln missed his train that was leaving West Chicago, and that he was persuaded to stay and debate. Years later, the West Chicago Women's Club made this marker and put it on the Neltnor property. It reads, "Joint debate in the senatorial contest between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas was held at this place." Many years later, some people swore that they had seen Abraham Lincoln speak at the Neltnor mansion. They also claimed that over 3,000 people had gathered there. However, there are no newspaper accounts that can verify this. Additionally, Abraham Lincoln historians say that Abraham Lincoln was nowhere in the area on this particular date. Nevertheless, Cornelia Neltnor was a huge proponent that Lincoln spoke at the Neltnor mansion. Regardless of the truth, this certainly adds mystique and mystery to the Neltnor house and the Neltnor property. In the early 1900s, the Neltnor mansion served as what was called a Tribune Hospital for children and mothers from the city who were in ill health and lived in bad conditions. The Neltnor mansion was converted into a getaway, and children were encouraged to play on the entire property. The Wheaton Illinoisan published on June 22, 1906, that the Tribune Convalescent Hospital, which occupied the Glen Ellen Hotel last season, has leased a place at West Chicago because no building had been available in Glen Ellen. The original location for the Tribune Hospital had been in Glen Ellen by Lake Ellen, but it was destroyed by a fire. So the following year, they went to the Neltnor Mansion in West Chicago. This article from the Chicago Daily Tribune wrote about the origin of the Tribune Hospitals. The Tribune Hospital's aim was in Chicago to get women and children out of the city so that they could regain their strength. More than 100 women and children were sent from Chicago to spend weeks, if not months, in the country. A 1906 article describes the move to the Neltnor Mansion. At the Neltnor Mansion, children of the Tribune Hospital were given free roam. The Tribune Hospital was based on donations and contributions, and the Neltnor house was completely changed into a hospital, where all the work was carried out there. However, the house became too small too quickly, as the needs of the hospital kept growing. Tents were put in the yard and were filled almost immediately. Later on, they found a 20-acre tract between Algonquin and Cary, Illinois, to continue the mission of the Tribune Hospital. While at the Neltnor Mansion, children of the hospital sent postcards to their friends and family. This is a postcard sent from the hospital. It says, "Dear sister, I like this place so well, I'm going to stay a week. Alice." This postcard, which was also sent from the Tribune Hospital at the Neltnor Mansion, says, "Dear Miss Schmidt, was very sorry to hear of your accident. I hope you will be back with us soon." As you can tell, the Neltnor family was very prominent in West Chicago. They were involved in community programs, charities, newspapers, and local business. Cornelia herself was well known in the community. The newspapers described her as the most traveled and best loved of all West Chicago women. On February 6, 1899, Cornelia married Frank Dell Anthony, a civil engineer who worked on the planning of Western railroads. Together they traveled throughout the United States and Canada. On these travels, Cornelia collected antiques as well as book plates. She also was a talented elocutionist and gave dramatic readings around the country. Frank and Cornelia lived in Albany, New York for 19 years. However, the West Chicago press described that Mr. Anthony was not in the best of health, having never entirely recovered from the effects of yellow fever that he suffered during his work in South America. As a result, Frank and Cornelia decided to move back to West Chicago. Once back in West Chicago, Cornelia and her husband moved into the Neltnor mansion at Grove Place. Cornelia became active in the Daughters of the American Revolution and organized the Hickory Grove chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. She was also an active member in the Antiquarian Society of the United States. She was also a society writer for the newspapers. In West Chicago, Cornelia filled the Neltnor mansion with antiques from her travels. The newspaper said that much of the furniture that she acquired once belonged to Edward, Duke of Kent, the fourth son of Queen Victoria, when he lived in Canada. These newspaper articles show a picture of a spinning wheel, a canopy bed, and an Easter bonnet. These pictures show other antiques that were in the Neltnor mansion. The portable altar has a caption that says it was once used by Jesuit priests in Canada when it was necessary for them to travel from place to place to say Mass. The portable altar could also be folded up. The other picture shows a 235-year-old piano, a wolf and fig piano from London. Mary Neltnor passed away in 1935, and John Neltnor passed away in 1937. Together they had been married for over 70 years. During his life, John Neltnor had owned a general store, produced the DuPage County Democrat, and the Wheaton Star Critic. He also produced a quarterly magazine called the Fruit and Flower Grower, and served as a police magistrate up to the age of 96. In 1930, the section of Route 59 by his home was named in his honor. This shows a picture of John Neltnor on his 98th birthday with his daughter Cornelia. After her father's death, Cornelia continued to live at Neltnor Mansion, and after her husband, Frank, passed away, Cornelia continued to live there alone. However, she remained active in the community and in Daughters of the American Revolution. Newspaper accounts said that she could be seen walking to Main Street and getting a ride back to Neltnor Mansion in a squad car. Cornelia Anthony passed away at the age of 91 on December 19, 1959. John C. Neltnor and his daughter Cornelia Anthony had a shared dream to see the Neltnor homestead one day become a museum. After Cornelia's death, the Neltnor house was vacant for several years. However, there were plans to try and make it become a museum. The West Chicago Railroad and Historical Society saw the importance of the house to the town, and they sought to preserve the Neltnor home. This is a newspaper article showing the West Chicagoans are seeking to preserve this historic house. In order to gain community interest and support, as well as financial funding for preservation, there were charged tours of the Anthony House, so that members of the community could come see the unique structure as well as the antique furniture inside. This is a form that community members would fill out in order to tour the Anthony home. The Chicago Daily Tribune described the Anthony home as the most historic house in the county. This is a picture of people coming to tour the Neltnor Anthony Mansion. The Chicago Daily Tribune estimated that over 400 persons toured the home in just one day. Additionally, newspapers wrote that the house was a Georgian colonial traditional building, and that when the cellar was excavated, a brass cannonball was unearthed along with several Indian arrowheads. However, on Thursday, April 25, 1963, the West Chicago Press wrote that Saturday, April 27th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Sunday, April 28th from noon to 5 was a final public viewing. Although they had tried to get funds to restore the Neltnor Anthony home, the efforts had failed. Shortly after the campaign to restore the Neltnor Anthony mansion had ended, the house had suffered a couple of fires. This newspaper article details one of the fires that hit the Neltnor Anthony mansion home. The first fire was in August 1964. The newspaper said that on Saturday night there was an indication of the house having been set either accidentally or on purpose on fire. Police and firemen found inflammable materials piled in a corner near where the fire started, and residents in the area told of seeing numerous persons running west from the Anthony home. The house suffered much structural damage. The fire had started in the middle of the south wall of an old basement coal bin. It burned through the floor above it and up past the first and second floors and into the cupola. Thankfully, the house was empty of inhabitants and furniture. The firemen who came to extinguish the fire used over 2,000 pounds of oxygen in their face masks. After having suffered several fires the year before, the Neltnor Anthony mansion burnt again in January 1966. The newspapers described it as an inferno that threw showers of sparks and debris over the entire area, as the historic structure was completely engulfed in flames. The newspapers also said that one explosion occurred in the building while firemen were fighting the fire. The fire chief at the time said that the fallen trees and neglected and accumulated brush had hampered the firemen from being able to get into the home and fight the blaze. After this fire, the Neltnor Anthony mansion needed to be demolished. This newspaper article discusses the sadness of the community and the sadness of the Neltnor Anthony home never becoming a museum. After the house was demolished, it remained a vacant lot for many years, until 1984, when it became the Sandpiper Restaurant. Although the Neltnors' dream of turning their house into a museum was never realized, the family has a lasting legacy through Cornelia's bookplate collection. In February 1935, Cornelia donated the entire collection to the West Chicago Public Library District. Her bookplate collection consists of over 10,000 bookplates, which she collected over a span of 14 years. At one time, this collection was considered to be only second to that of the Library of Congress's bookplate collection. This photo depicts Cornelia's bookplate. It has angels, books, and bookshelves drawn on it. The quote says, "Love rules the court, the camp, the grove, and men below and saints above." This is another one of Cornelia Anthony's bookplates. As you can see, her name is written towards the bottom, and there are depictions of spinning wheels, teapots, cups, saucers, and candlesticks. Bookplates originated in the 15th century as a sort of mark of achievement. The ability to read and write, much less be able to afford books, was quite an accomplishment. Bookplates served as a label and were placed on the inside cover of a book. This is John C. Neltnor's bookplate, Cornelia's father. You can see his name is written at the bottom of the bookplate, as well as a depiction of somebody reading in a chair in a library. There's also depictions of lots of books and candles. The date on this bookplate is 1913. Bookplates were often put in the front cover of a book in order to show ownership. Sometimes there were quotes on bookplates in order to ensure that the book was returned to its proper owner. Here are two quotes. "If thou art borrowed by a friend, right welcome shall he be. To read, to study, not to lend, but to return to me." Sometimes the quotes were a little bit more harsh. "Steal not this book, my honest friend, for fear the gallows will be your end. Up the ladder and down the rope, there you'll hang until you choke. Then I'll come along and say, where is that book you took away?" This bookplate was also found in Cornelia Neltnor's bookplate collection. It's a picture of 3 dogs and some books. You can also see the phrase ex libris. Oftentimes, bookplates were just consisted of pictures that entertained the owner of the bookplate. The phrase ex libris is Latin for from the book of, and was common on many bookplates. The material for making bookplates ranged from being woodcut to using silk screen to etchings on metal or simply using pen and ink. When using pen and ink, it was important for the bookplates to be made with the finest paper quality. For noble families, bookplates were adorned with symbols of heraldry, often the shield of arms or the family crest. This bookplate is found in Cornelia's collection and belonged to Prince Augustus Frederick, the Duke of Sussex. He was the sixth son of George III and lived from 1773 to 1843. The family crest is seen on this bookplate, with depictions of lions, royal crowns, and horses. The quotes towards the bottom of the bookplate state, "Shame to him who evil thinks," and "If God be with us, who can be against us?" This next bookplate is Princess Elizabeth's bookplate. Princess Elizabeth, also known as Elizabeth II, also known as Queen Elizabeth of England, was born in 1926, and her name is written at the bottom of the bookplate. There's also images of a lion, a unicorn, the royal crown, and the family crest. The date on this bookplate, which is found in Cornelia Neltnor's bookplate collection, is 1941. This is a bookplate from Pasadena Public Library in Pasadena, California. You can see on the bookplate that there's a picture of a library, a palm tree, a fountain, and somebody reading by the library. This bookplate was given to the Cornelia Neltnor collection by the Evanston Public Library. Bookplates served useful for not only individuals but also institutions. The American Society of Bookplate Collectors and Designers say that institutions such as public and private libraries, universities, law firms, and museums use bookplates to identify a specific collection of books or multiple collections. Additionally, bookplates were used to denote when a book was added to the collection or to denote a specific interest or topic in the collection. The next bookplate is of Edgar Allan Poe's bookplate. Edgar Allan Poe was a famous American author and poet, best known for The Telltale Heart and The Raven. Poe lived from 1809 to 1849. On his bookplate are pictures of bells, ropes, bell ringers, and violins. According to the American Society of Bookplate Collectors and Designers, bookplates were designed by artists and engravers who were known for fine detail on small pieces of art, such as bookplates. These engravers and artists were acknowledged as bookplate designers and bookplate illustrators. The following bookplate found in Cornelia's bookplate collection is that of Rudyard Kipling. Rudyard Kipling was an English writer and poet who lived from 1865 to 1936. He's most well known for his stories that took place in India and for the children's classics such as The Jungle Book. This bookplate is dated 1894 and has images of elephants and birds throughout. You can also see a mahout, which is a person who rides an elephant, and a howdah, which are the carriages that are placed on top of elephants. In addition to royal families and authors and poets, bookplates were also held by presidents from the United States. This bookplate is from Woodrow Wilson, the 28th President of the United States, from 1913 to 1921. The bookplate depicts a man sitting thoughtfully at a table, with a cathedral, possibly the Notre Dame, in the background. The quote on the bookplate says, "Behind the clouds, the sun is still shining. Out of the darkness, unity must come." This bookplate is dated 1918 and was given to the collection by Carl S. Jung, a well-known bookplate artist and designer from Oak Park, Illinois. This next bookplate is that of Herbert Hoover. You can even see his signature at the bottom of the bookplate. Herbert Hoover served as the 31st President of the United States from 1929 to 1933. His bookplate has a somewhat mystical setting that is paired with farmers against a vibrant landscape. However, long before President Hoover, many early presidents also had bookplates. For example, President George Washington had a bookplate in armorial design with the phrase, "The end shows the deed." Additionally, John Adams, John Quincy Adams, and John Tyler also used bookplates. John Adams had a bookplate with a shield of arms that said, "Keep liberty, friendship, and good faith." John Quincy Adams had a shield and a crest with a name engraved on it. And John Tyler simply had a plain label for his bookplate. In addition to President Woodrow Wilson and President Herbert Hoover, Cornelia's bookplate collection also consisted of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's bookplate. FDR was the 32nd President of the United States. He served from 1933 to 1945. This bookplate has images of roses, an anchor, and stars, in addition to his name written on it. On the back of the bookplate is an address, 52 Wall Street, New York. It also says, "Given by the owner." This means that the bookplate was presumably given to Cornelia by FDR himself. The practice of bookplate collecting began more than a century ago. Bookplate collecting is essentially the trade or exchange of duplicate bookplates. According to the American Society of Bookplate Collectors and Designers, sometimes many bookplates are made for the sole purpose of trading. That means that oftentimes bookplates from well-known persons were passed on or traded from collector to collector, not necessarily directly from the original owner. The exception is when it says, "Given by the owner," on the back of the bookplate, such as the FDR bookplate found in Cornelia's bookplate collection. This next bookplate is that of Andrew Carnegie, the American steel industry tycoon. Andrew Carnegie lived from 1835 to 1919. In addition to his successful business endeavors, Andrew Carnegie is known for his establishment of free public library buildings, which he began in over 2,500 different communities. His bookplate shown here depicts books, torches, flames, and eagles, as well as a quote that says, "Let there be light." On the back of the bookplate is writing that says, "Given by Mrs. Andrew Carnegie." One of Andrew Carnegie's business associates was John Pierpont Morgan, better known as J.P. Morgan. Carnegie sold his steel company to J.P. Morgan, an American banker, in 1901 for $400 million. Here is J.P. Morgan's bookplate, found in Cornelia's bookplate collection. J.P. Morgan's bookplate is armorial in nature, with a picture of a deer towards the top. There's a saying engraved on the crest that says "Onward and Upward." On the back of J.P. Morgan's bookplate is writing that says it was given by the owner. Cornelia's bookplate collection has over 10,000 bookplates, including bookplates from royalty, American presidents, and famous authors. However, no bookplate collection would be complete without a Charles Chaplin bookplate. This bookplate consists of Charlie Chaplin's famous garb, a hat, cane, boots, and his infamous mustache. At the bottom of the bookplate says, "His book." On the back of the bookplate is writing that says it was given by the owner. The Neltnor family of West Chicago had a strong impact on the community. From the successful general store, which they owned for over 60 years, to their home at Grove Place, which was used for gatherings and charity affairs, to their involvement in organizations throughout the town, the Neltnors were an important part of West Chicago history. While the house and general store may be forever gone, their influence on the city lives through Cornelia's bookplate collection. Over the span of 14 years, Cornelia collected over 10,000 bookplates. At one time, the collection was considered by librarians to be only second to that of the Library of Congress's bookplate collection. Generously, Cornelia donated the book plates to the West Chicago Public Library District. A selection of the bookplate collection has been digitized and can be accessed from any computer with internet. Simply go to the West Chicago Public Library District website at www.westchicago.lib.il.us and find on the main page a link to the bookplate collection. This is what the digitized site looks like, and you can search by keyword or simply just browse. Now we can all enjoy this outstanding collection. As Cornelia Anthony's bookplate quote says, "Love rules the court, the camp, the grove, and men below, and saints above."